The most dangerous lie during collapse is the one that feels calm. It doesn't sound like panic. It doesn't scream danger. It whispers reassurance. Stay where you are. Don't overreact. Let things settle. That voice feels rational, adult, responsible. It sounds like the voice of experience, and in the first hours of breakdown, it often seems right. Streets are quiet, lights still work, neighbors still nod, nothing looks broken yet. That's exactly when the trap closes. Collapse doesn't announce itself with chaos. It arrives disguised as normality. Systems don't fail all at once. They weaken in layers. Supply chains hiccup, services delay. Communication grows inconsistent. Each problem feels temporary, fixable, ignorable. And because nothing explodes immediately, people assume stability still exists. Homes reinforce this illusion. They're built to feel safe, enclosed, predictable. Walls create the impression of control. Doors create the illusion of boundaries. But modern homes are not fortresses. They are terminals, dependent on electricity, water pressure, logistics, and enforcement. When those external systems fail, the house doesn't protect you. It traps you inside a structure that cannot sustain itself. Staying put feels responsible because it postpones hard choices. Movement requires admitting that the world has changed. Staying lets you pretend it hasn't. You tell yourself you'll leave if it gets worse. But collapse doesn't wait for clarity. It tightens gradually, then suddenly. At first, movement feels optional. Roads are open. Gas stations still have fuel. Stores still have shelves. You can leave anytime, or so it seems. But every hour that passes, options quietly narrow. Traffic thickens. Fuel disappears. Authorities impose controls. Neighborhoods grow tense. What was once a simple drive becomes a calculated risk. This is the illusion that kills people, believing that because nothing bad has happened yet, nothing will. By the time fear replaces comfort, movement becomes dangerous. You're no longer choosing when to go, you're reacting to pressure. And reaction is slower than intention. When everyone moves at once, mobility collapses. Roads clog, tempers flare, mistakes compound. The people who survive are rarely the strongest or the bravest. They are the ones who understand timing. They recognize that safety is not a place, it's a window. And that window closes quietly. Staying too long turns your home into a liability. Once utilities fail, it becomes an anchor. Once supplies run low, it becomes a beacon. Once neighbors grow desperate, it becomes a target. What once felt like shelter becomes exposure. The cruel truth is that staying feels safest precisely when it is most dangerous. Movement early looks paranoid. Movement late looks like panic. Only one of those keeps options alive. Collapse doesn't punish fear. It punishes delay. And by the time staying feels uncomfortable, the chance to leave cleanly is already gone. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see where the survivors are watching from. And hit subscribe while you're here. Familiar spaces feel safe because your brain has mapped them. You know where the light switch is in the dark. You know which floorboard creaks. You know how the air smells at night. That familiarity creates a powerful illusion of control. And in normal life, that illusion works. In collapse, it becomes a sedative. It calms you while danger quietly rearranges itself outside your door. Homes were never designed to be strongholds. They were designed for efficiency during stability. Thin walls, predictable access points, visible routines, all of these make life easier when society functions. When it doesn't, they turn your living space into a readable signal. Anyone paying attention can tell who is still active, who has supplies, and who hasn't yet adapted. Visibility becomes your enemy long before violence does. Light at night, smoke from cooking, regular movement at predictable hours. These patterns broadcast survival to anyone watching. You don't need to be targeted intentionally. Curiosity alone is enough to draw attention. And attention compounds fast when stress spreads. The longer you stay, the more your home becomes a node instead of a shelter. Neighbors start checking in just to see if you're okay. People ask casual questions with heavy implications. Do you still have power? Are you doing all right for food? None of it sounds threatening, but each question collects data. And data in collapse is leverage. Familiar walls also lock you into failing systems. You ration water instead of finding new sources. You improvise power instead of relocating. You adjust to less rather than moving toward more. Each workaround feels clever, but it also deepens commitment to a place that is slowly becoming unlivable. The more you adapt, the harder it becomes to leave. Psychologically, this creates a trap. Effort becomes investment. Investment creates attachment. Attachment breeds justification. You start telling yourself that leaving now would waste everything you've done, so you stay one more day. Then another. Meanwhile, the environment shifts around you. Movement patterns change. Informal rules replace official ones. Areas that were neutral become claimed. The window for clean movement narrows while you're still organizing inside a shrinking box. People often imagine collapse as chaos breaking in. In reality, it's stagnation closing around you. The danger isn't the moment things fall apart. It's the slow tightening afterward, when staying feels easier than acting and risk feels abstract. Those who survive long-term recognize this pattern early. They don't wait for comfort to disappear before they move. They understand that familiarity is a luxury that expires quickly. When it starts demanding effort instead of providing safety, it's already past time to go. Leaving early isn't panic. It's foresight. It's recognizing that safety is not a place. It's momentum. Once momentum is gone, walls stop protecting you, and by the time you realize the room is shrinking, the door is no longer yours to open. There is a moment in every collapse when movement stops being a risk and starts becoming the only remaining advantage. It doesn't arrive with alarms or announcements. It arrives quietly, through small disruptions that feel easy to ignore. Lines take longer. Conversations shorten. People stop making eye contact. The air itself feels heavier, as if decisions have weight now. This is the moment when systems stop absorbing pressure and begin passing it downward. The buffer disappears. What used to be handled by infrastructure is suddenly handled by people, and people handle stress poorly. That's when movement stops being optional and starts becoming strategic. At first, movement feels unnecessary. You still have access, roads still function, fuel still exists, the map still looks usable. Staying feels reasonable because nothing has fully collapsed yet. That's the illusion. Collapse rarely arrives as a wall. It arrives as friction. Every task takes longer. Every solution requires negotiation. Every choice carries consequence. Movement at this stage isn't flight, it's positioning. It's choosing where you want to be before the environment chooses for you. Those who move early aren't fleeing danger, they're buying options. They are selecting terrain, timing, and distance while those variables are still flexible. Once fear takes hold, movement becomes visible. People start watching who leaves and who stays. Roads fill with uncertainty. Every vehicle becomes a question mark. Every traveler becomes a potential threat. When that happens, motion draws attention instead of avoiding it. The window closes quietly, then slams shut. This is the paradox most people miss. The safest moment to move is when movement feels unnecessary, when you still have plausible deniability, when you can leave without explanation, when your departure doesn't register as a signal to anyone else. Waiting for confirmation is a trap. Collapse does not provide official notices. It offers gradients, subtle shifts that only make sense in hindsight. By the time danger is undeniable, everyone sees it, and the mass response creates its own hazards. Congestion, panic, resource competition, the very things people were trying to avoid by staying. Movement also resets context. It breaks behavioral expectations others have built around you. In familiar places, people know your routines, your habits, your thresholds. They know when you're likely to be home. They know what you'll tolerate. Movement dissolves that knowledge. It gives you anonymity again, and anonymity is a form of protection. Staying locks you into existing relationships, power dynamics, and assumptions. Moving dissolves them. You're no longer the neighbor, the helper, the predictable presence. You become unknown, and unknowns are harder to exploit. This doesn't mean wandering aimlessly. It means understanding that adaptability is more valuable than endurance. Static strength fails when pressure shifts. Mobile resilience bends instead of breaks. The people who survive longest aren't the strongest or the most prepared. They're the ones who move before they're forced to. They treat location as temporary and identity as flexible. They don't confuse comfort with safety. When movement becomes mandatory, it's already dangerous. When it's optional, it's powerful. Collapse rewards timing, not courage. It favors those who step away while others are still convincing themselves that nothing has changed. And by the time staying feels unsafe, movement has already become the most expensive choice you can make. The moment you stop moving, you begin to register on other people's mental maps, not in a dramatic way, not as a threat or a target, just as a constant, a known shape in a shifting environment. And in collapse, anything constant becomes a reference point. Reference points attract attention, and attention changes behavior. People don't need cameras or surveillance to map you. They do it instinctively. They notice lights that turn on at the same hour, smoke that rises from the same roof, movement that repeats. Familiarity builds a quiet ledger in their minds. Who's still functioning? Who has power? Who seems unaffected? That information spreads faster than fear because it feels useful. Staying in one place signals stability, and stability invites expectation. People assume that if you're still standing, you must have something figured out. They don't resent you at first. They observe. They ask casual questions. They measure your answers against their own scarcity. This isn't malice, it's pattern recognition under stress. Fixed locations simplify decision-making for others. When uncertainty grows, people gravitate toward what feels known. A house with light becomes a reference point. A familiar face becomes a point of orientation. Gradually, presence turns into reliance, and reliance quietly becomes pressure. The danger is not confrontation, it's convergence. People begin to orbit. They stop solving their own problems because your existence suggests a solution. You become part of their mental infrastructure. Once that happens, leaving feels disruptive to them, even though staying drains you. Static locations also create predictability. Routines form without intention. The same path to the door, the same timing for meals, the same moments of visibility. Patterns appear, and patterns invite interpretation. Someone always notices more than you think. Someone always connects dots you didn't know you drew. The myth of the safe home comes from peacetime thinking. In stable systems, permanence means protection. In collapse, permanence means exposure. Anything that doesn't move gets observed. Anything observed gets assessed. Anything assessed eventually gets tested. Staying in one place also narrows perception. When your attention is consumed by maintaining a single environment, you lose awareness of larger shifts. You adapt locally while the broader landscape changes. By the time you sense the shift, your ability to respond is limited by attachments you didn't realize you were building. Those who last understand that safety is not a location. It's a state of motion, not constant movement, but the ability to disengage without friction. They treat places as temporary tools, not identities. They stay light enough to leave without drama. Once a place defines you, it owns you. And when it becomes unsafe, escape feels like loss instead of strategy. The people who survive longest are the ones who move before anyone expects them to. Not in panic, not in fear, but with quiet intention. They understand that staying still in a changing world is the loudest signal you can send. And when the world starts watching, the safest place is no longer where you are. Most people don't stay because they believe it's safe. They stay because leaving feels like loss. Loss of routine. Loss of identity. Loss of the version of themselves that still made sense yesterday. Movement feels like admitting that something permanent has shifted, and the human mind resists that admission with surprising force. Delay feels gentler than action. It lets you pretend that the world is still negotiable. You tell yourself you're gathering information, waiting for clarity, being responsible. In truth, you're buying time with comfort, and comfort always charges interest. The brain is built to preserve energy and reduce uncertainty. Familiar routines demand less cognitive effort than unfamiliar ones. When stress rises, the mind clings harder to the known, even when the known is failing. This is why people stay in crumbling systems longer than logic allows. It feels easier to manage decline than to confront change. Collapse exploits this bias. It doesn't announce itself with catastrophe. It erodes. Power flickers. Supplies thin. Rules blur. Each day still feels survivable, so the mind postpones decisive action. One more day becomes a mantra, and then a habit. By the time the cost of staying is obvious, the cost of leaving has multiplied. There's also a social gravity to delay. When everyone around you hesitates, hesitation feels validated. No one wants to be the first to act and risk being wrong. Movement looks irrational until it suddenly looks late. Groups stall together, reinforcing each other's doubt until motion becomes panic instead of choice. This is how collapse traps people without walls. The environment doesn't force you to stay, your own psychology does. You wait for permission that never comes. You look for confirmation that never arrives. Meanwhile, conditions degrade quietly, compressing your options. The danger is that delay feels productive. You plan, you organize, you prepare contingencies, but preparation without execution becomes another form of avoidance. It gives the illusion of control while time erodes the very conditions that made action possible. Those who survive learn to read trajectories, not moments. They don't wait for certainty because certainty only appears in hindsight. They watch patterns, shrinking margins, growing friction, shifting behavior. When those align, they act, not dramatically, but deliberately. They understand that the cost of leaving is always paid up front, while the cost of staying is deferred with interest. One demands courage, the other demands endurance. Only one of those scales. The cruel truth is that most people don't fail because they made the wrong move. They fail because they waited for proof that never came. Collapse doesn't reward patience. It rewards timing. And timing belongs to those who move before staying becomes the default, and before the door closes quietly behind them. Leaving doesn't mean panic. It means intention. There is a difference between escape and repositioning, and survivors understand it instinctively. Panic scatters energy. Intention focuses it. When movement comes from clarity instead of fear, it carries weight without noise. The body moves with purpose instead of urgency, and that distinction changes everything. Those who leave at the right time don't react to danger, they preempt it. They don't wait for fear to push them forward. They move while the world still feels mostly normal, when leaving can be done quietly and without explanation. Their calm isn't denial, it's timing. They step out of trajectories before those trajectories harden. Movement like this doesn't look dramatic. There's no rush, no visible urgency. It's a soft withdrawal, fewer belongings, fewer routines, fewer ties. The act itself is almost invisible. That invisibility is the point. When others begin to notice movement, it's already too late to move safely. Survivors don't chase safety as a destination. They look for flexibility, places that allow adjustment, observation, and retreat. They favor options over comfort. A location that lets you leave is more valuable than one that feels secure. Mobility becomes a form of insurance, not an emergency response. What traps most people isn't danger, but attachment. Attachment to normalcy. Attachment to identity. Attachment to the idea that staying proves strength. But endurance without adaptability becomes fragility. Holding ground only works when the ground itself is stable. When it isn't, endurance becomes exposure. Late movement is chaotic because it's reactive. By the time fear takes over, everyone moves at once. Roads clog. Information collapses. Trust evaporates. Every decision carries friction. Movement stops being strategy and becomes desperation. That's when mistakes compound and outcomes spiral. Early movement, by contrast, preserves choice. It keeps paths open. It allows recalibration. It turns unknowns into variables instead of threats. People who move early don't need to rush because they've already stepped outside the compression zone. The hardest part is psychological. Leaving feels like admitting defeat. It feels like giving up on the world you knew. But survival doesn't measure loyalty to the past. It measures alignment with reality. The world doesn't reward attachment. It rewards adaptability. Those who endure understand this quietly. They don't announce departures. They don't seek validation. They move when staying starts to feel heavier than leaving, not when danger becomes obvious. They accept the discomfort of change in exchange for freedom of motion. Collapse rarely kills through violence. It kills through inertia, through waiting, through hoping things will stabilize on their own. The people who live are rarely the strongest or the boldest. They're the ones who recognize the moment when staying stopped being safe and left before the world noticed they were gone.